They're feeling it right now. Not tomorrow, not in a few weeks. Right now, in the exact moment you are taking this breath, a soul hopelessly entangled with yours is completely shattering. This is not just background noise, this is a total, devastating collapse. Someone who once held your beating heart, someone eternally bound to you through deep karmic history and sacred soul contracts, is drowning in a terror so profound it is aching in their very bones. This isn't surface anxiety or everyday stress. It is the suffocating dread that strikes when a soul finally realizes it has made a fatal, irreversible mistake. They took your light for granted. They arrogantly assumed you were permanent, and now they are realizing with agonizing clarity that your warmth is gone. You shifted. Maybe you didn't even plan to. Maybe it was just pure, exhausted survival instinct. But something deep within your energy fractured and changed, and they felt it like a violent earthquake ripping through their chest. Across whatever physical distance separates your bodies, across the heavy, suffocating silence that has stretched since your last words, they felt the precise, heartbreaking second you stopped. You stopped waiting. You stopped holding a sacred space for them. You stopped being the safe harbor they could constantly run back to while they selfishly explored other people, other fleeting options, other empty versions of life that did not include you. That energetic withdrawal crashed into their nervous system like a seismic shockwave, and absolutely nothing they do can stop the trembling. This is the tragic sound of someone realizing, entirely too late, that you are utterly irreplaceable. Write in the comments, they feel it. If these words are landing heavy in your gut, if you recognize the raw truth of their current, desperate unraveling, if you can sense the panicked urgency pulsing beneath every single line, echoing the exact urgency racing through their mind right now, then you already know something profoundly shifted inside of you. It didn't happen loudly. It wasn't dramatic. There were no grand announcements, no bitter ultimatums, no tear-soaked confrontations. It happened in absolute quiet, internally, like heavy tectonic plates shifting beneath dark, still water. You simply stopped performing the exhausting role of the one who waits. You stopped anxiously checking if they viewed your stories. You stopped drafting desperate messages you would never actually hit send on. You stop building your fragile emotional state around their inconsistent presence or cruel absence in your daily life. No grand declaration accompanied this shift. No final, tragic speech. This was simply your pure exhaustion finally crossing the holy threshold into self-preservation. Your beautiful soul chose its own survival over a toxic fantasy of their eventual return. And the exact second that happened, they felt it. They felt the precise moment your radiant energy slammed shut, shifting from eternally open and available to entirely occupied with your own glorious healing. Your silence transformed. It stopped being the anxious silence of someone waiting by a locked door. It became the deafening silence of someone who has already walked away to build a completely different home. The beautiful messages you once composed in your mind, the radiant hope you once carried burning like a torch through their darkness, were gently, finally set down. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with the quiet, aching, beautiful peace of a soul that has finally accepted what is, rather than bleeding for what could have been. They sense this profound shift in ways their mind cannot even articulate. They feel the sudden jarring absence of a love they never consciously acknowledged was keeping them alive. Your energetic attention, which once rushed toward them like a devoted river pouring into the ocean, has been completely rerouted. Rerouted toward your own magnificent healing, toward your own passions, toward a beautiful life that is beginning to wildly bloom without them at the center. That redirection carved a massive void into their reality. A haunting, empty space where your pure focus once lived, and that hollow space is now screaming at them in frequencies so much louder than your words ever could. They are drowning in the brutal paradox of loss. Only now, when you have finally stopped choosing them, do they grasp the crushing weight of being chosen by someone like you. Only now that your infinite patience has bled out do they understand the sacred gift of being waited for. They foolishly assumed you would always just be there, not out of deliberate, calculated cruelty, not out of conscious arrogance, but out of the tragic, deeply human flaw of confusing your divine consistency with blind permanence, of treating your boundless patience as though it were an unlimited tolerance for their chaos. You were the single, beautiful constant inside their turbulent storm, the reliable anchor in their crippling uncertainty, the safe, warm place they crawled back to after chasing cheap connections that always revealed themselves as hollow, temporary, and bitterly insufficient. They built their entire emotional survival on the fragile assumption that you would just stay frozen exactly where they left you, holding the exact same love, waiting exactly as before. And now that entire architecture is collapsing, not with a sudden crash, but with the slow, merciless, agonizing decay of something built on an illusion. The realization is crushing them like a slow-motion avalanche, obliterating every comfortable, arrogant assumption they ever had about your feelings and your willingness to suffer this cycle indefinitely. Carl Jung deeply understood this specific torment when he observed that we never truly value the treasure we possess until the agonizing moment it is ripped away, until the comforting and familiar becomes suddenly, terrifyingly unavailable. They are trapped inside that agonizing truth right now, experiencing the specific, suffocating agony of recognizing a diamond only as it slips through their fingers. You were not just another option in their messy emotional landscape. You were the only option, the one rare soul whose presence made every other person feel like a cheap rehearsal, a meaningless distraction to avoid the terrifying, raw intensity that burned between you two. But they were entirely blind to this while you were so easily available, while your pure devotion poured into them without conditions. The flawed human mind requires brutal contrast to see. We only understand the miracle of light because we have suffered in the pitch black. We only value genuine, soul-deep connection because we have tasted the bitter ash of true isolation. Your quiet withdrawal finally gave them the devastating contrast they needed to see you with crystal-clear eyes and to recognize the sheer magnitude of the treasure they so carelessly threw away. They are obsessively replaying everything now, tormenting themselves by re-examining every single moment they cowardly chose distance over your beautiful closeness, reviewing every terrible decision that walked them to this freezing edge where you no longer stand waiting. The shock tearing through their nervous system is the pure terror of genuine, irreversible loss, not the theoretical, temporary separation they arrogantly assumed they could reverse the second they felt lonely. This is the chilling realization that you have moved forward, quietly, gracefully, without any drama, armed with the devastatingly beautiful calm of someone who has finally chosen themselves. The person they took for granted has permanently evicted them from their energy field, and this deafening absence is violently teaching them everything they refused to learn while you were standing right in front of them. The mental space they are trapped in right now is a haunted house where every single room holds only your ghost, where every shadow echoes with the beautiful conversations you shared and the desperate conversations you never got to have. They simply cannot stop the painful replay, the torturous, obsessive audit of every text message, every shared look, every single time they foolishly chose their fragile pride instead of raw honesty, fear instead of beautiful vulnerability, and cheap convenience instead of deep, actual commitment. This is not sweet, casual nostalgia. This is the agonizing torment of the soul that realizes they just burned down their own future. Their frantic thoughts violently return to you, interrupting their meetings, their social distractions, and their quiet, lonely nights with the relentless, screaming insistence of unfinished business, words left unspoken. Deep feelings buried under heavy layers of self-protection that now feel like a suffocating prison rather than a safe shield. They desperately measure every new person against you, and every single one falls bitterly short. Every forced conversation exposes the glaring void. Every empty date amplifies the painful absence of the intoxicating rare chemistry that exploded between you two. Every desperate attempt to move forward reveals itself as a pathetic attempt to recreate the exact magic they already held and so carelessly destroyed. The projection is relentless. They see your beautiful face in crowded rooms. They hear your laugh in sounds that bear no real resemblance to your voice. They feel your warm presence lingering in rooms you have never even entered. Their shadow self, that dark aspect of the psyche Jung identified as holding every rejected, unloved part of the personality, is violently erupting to the surface now with undeniable explosive force. All the feelings they desperately refused to acknowledge. All the intense attachment they vehemently denied. All the profound, terrifying love they could never bring themselves to admit. These heavy shadow elements are currently flooding their waking consciousness, violently demanding to be felt rather than buried. No one feels like you. This haunting phrase runs through their mind like a dark mantra, like a heavy curse, like a blinding truth they can no longer outrun. No matter how many cheap distractions they cram into their calendar, no matter how many temporary faces they drag into their orbit, the unique, divine frequency of your beautiful soul has burned itself into their spiritual DNA in ways they are only now tragically beginning to understand. They foolishly believed they could easily find your magic somewhere else. They were entirely, devastatingly wrong. Where your radiant energy once filled them, a hollow, echoing emptiness now lives. An invisible weight that follows them through each day like a dark shadow they cannot escape. Like a starving hunger no meal can ever satisfy. This isn't just missing someone emotionally. This is a profound energetic vacuum. The terrifying phenomenon that strikes when two deeply entangled souls are ripped apart and one completely withdraws their light from the shared spiritual field. You are not merely a memory occupying space in their mind. You are permanently woven into the very fabric of their energetic body. Your consciousness is still touching theirs in the subtle, sacred realm where souls secretly communicate beneath all human words and physical touch. When you pulled your attention back, when you finally stopped transmitting your bright hope and patient waiting toward them, you carved a gaping, bleeding void into their system that they can physically feel but cannot name. They frantically attempt to fill this void with chaotic movement, with other temporary people, with exhausting work and mindless routines that keep them running fast enough to outpace the crushing emptiness. But it persists. It aggressively expands. It demands attention with a violent insistence because the pure magic you provided was entirely irreplaceable through ordinary surface-level intimacy. You are feeding a deep hunger in their soul they never even consciously acknowledge, providing a divine spiritual nourishment they arrogantly assumed would always be on tap until you finally, permanently, cut the supply off. The collective unconscious holds a sacred, protective space for these rare connections, recognizing them as divinely significant beyond what rational, fearful human thinking can ever comprehend. Jung spoke of this hidden reality existing deep beneath our waking awareness, the profound, shared psychic space where twin souls violently touch and shape each other across space, time, and impossible distance. You and this person collided in that deeper, ancient realm. You forged glowing, energetic pathways between your consciousness and theirs, and those raw pathways are currently experiencing the screaming agony of severance. They desperately reach for you in the invisible dimensions where soul speaks directly to soul, and they find only a freezing, deafening absence where your warm presence used to breathe. Subscribe to this channel for weekly spiritual guidance on navigating divine timing, profound energetic connections, and the beautiful sacred journey back to your own heart. This hollow void you left behind is violently teaching them what your loving words never could. It is forcing a brutal confrontation with the true magnitude of what they treated as optional. The crushing emptiness has become their cruelest teacher, and its lesson is brutally, unapologetically clear. If their paralyzing fear were not blocking them, If their stubborn, wounded pride could just step aside for one single breath of raw truth, if the authentic voice of their soul could scream without the suffocating interference of the bruised ego that has ruined their choices until now, they would fall to their knees and tell you everything. I was so wrong. These 3 agonizing words repeat inside their head 1,000 times a day, heavy with bitter recognition, sharp with the blinding pain of hindsight that exposes every single moment they cowardly chose self-protection over beautiful, messy truth. Wrong to run. Wrong to blindly assume your beautiful waiting had no expiration date. Wrong to treat your rare, unconditional love as something that required no effort, no safety, no protection. I am so sorry. The apology is choking them, lodged in their throat like jagged glass, because speaking it out loud requires admitting the catastrophic scale of their failure. It demands a terrifying vulnerability they have spent their entire life carefully avoiding. It means dropping the heavy, defensive armor that made them feel protected, but ultimately left them freezing and completely alone. I need you. This is the confession that terrifies them more than death itself. Because needing you shatters the arrogant illusion they built about their fierce independence, their endless options, and their delusional capacity to truly flourish without your light. But the raw need is undeniably drowning them now, rising through their consciousness like dark water flooding a locked room, completely impossible to contain no matter how many sandbags of distraction they frantically pile against the door. They want to break down and tell you that absolutely no one sees their soul the way you did, that no human connection has ever felt as effortless and profound as what exploded between you two, that they have desperately searched 100 empty faces for the specific beautiful light that lived only in your eyes when you looked at them. They want to confess that leaving wasn't strength, it was pure cowardice. It wasn't finding themselves. It was running terrified from the blinding light of what you genuinely offered them. They want to explain that they foolishly believed they needed space to find their freedom, only to discover that the cold space without you feels like a permanent exile, that it feels like being locked outside in the freezing rain, staring through the window of the only place they ever truly felt like home. But they hesitate. Their toxic pride whispers that reaching out means accepting a humiliating defeat, that crawling back means acknowledging the horrifying scale of their mistake, that speaking these raw truths means surrendering the very last fragile fragments of ego that still make them feel in control. Their paralyzing fear screams that you have already moved on completely, that you would coldly turn them away, that the warm door they arrogantly assumed would always remain cracked open has finally, permanently locked shut. They're at war internally, violently caught in the excruciating crossfire between what their soul desperately craves and what their fragile ego fiercely resists, between the heart's screaming directive and the mind's pathetic, endless excuses for remaining paralyzed. Pride aggressively occupies one side of this bloody internal battlefield, armed with 1,000 cowardly reasons why they shouldn't reach out, shouldn't confess their massive mistake, shouldn't show their soft underbelly to the incredible person they once foolishly walked away from. Pride inflates their original, flawed reasons for running. It deceptively whispers that returning would make them look weak, unstable, or foolish. But love stands on the exact opposite side, entirely unarmed but absolutely indestructible, pulling them toward your gravity with a force that violently compounds every single day, whispering the undeniable truth. Genuine soul-deep connection matters so much more than preserving a fake, carefully constructed mask. Fear of rejection is waging a bloody war against the agonizing fear of permanent loss, trapping them in an endless, suffocating cycle that keeps them frozen between dialing your number and staring at the wall in silence. They are terrified that reaching out to you now, after all this heavy silence, after you have so beautifully and visibly moved forward without them, will result in a brutal rejection that would confirm their absolute darkest insecurities about their own worth. but they are equally violently terrified that remaining completely silent means being forced to watch you walk into a beautiful sunset without them. Watching the window permanently, irrevocably seal shut, leaving them stranded with nothing but rotting regret and the haunting, inescapable clarity of the masterpiece they allowed to slip through their hands. Jung deeply understood this painful fragmentation, this internal violent war between parts of the psyche pulling toward totally contradictory outcomes. The healed, integrated self remains completely out of reach when toxic pride and pure love are forced to share the same room, when the bruised ego and the ancient soul are screaming in entirely different languages. When deep burning desire and the sheer terror of that desire create total paralysis rather than brave action. But listen closely, their pride is rapidly fracturing under the crushing, sustained pressure of your radiant absence. The heavy armor they built to protect themselves from getting hurt is now the exact prison wall standing between them and the one breathtaking connection they are starving for. A divine, unavoidable moment is rapidly approaching. A moment governed by sacred timing they cannot manipulate or escape. When their stubborn pride will finally shatter into dust, when the agonizing pain of the silence finally eclipses the terrifying fear of speaking, when the soul's desperate command screams so much louder than the ego's pathetic resistance, that explosive moment is accumulating inside their chest right now, swelling like a massive tidal wave that must eventually crash onto the shore. Watch for the urgent signs that the dam is cracking, the specific, frantic patterns that emerge when a soul can no longer bear the agonizing distance they created. They are desperately checking your social media, viewing your stories the very second you post them, obsessively scrolling through your feed, starving for any tiny breadcrumb of your emotional state, your current reality, praying to see if you are genuinely healed and glowing, or if you are still carrying the heavy, bitter weight of their departure. This digital surveillance is their pathetic method of maintaining a thin thread of connection while sustaining the cowardly fiction of separation. It is their desperate compromise between the starving hunger for your contact and the paralyzing fear preventing direct communication. They're nervously circling mutual friends with casual inquiries that poorly disguise their frantic, deeper investigation, asking about you in ways designed to sound offhand, but only exposing their obsessive, continued preoccupation. The synchronicities are violently intensifying. You think of them, and your phone suddenly lights up with a notification carrying their name. You hear them mentioned in random conversation. You encounter their haunting memory in locations where their presence should feel impossible, but instead feels entirely orchestrated by something far beyond mere coincidence. These are not random accidents. These are undeniable evidence of profound energetic entanglement. The exact phenomenon Jung identified as synchronicity meaningful, destined coincidences that reveal hidden, glowing bridges between internal consciousness and external reality. Your intuition may suddenly spike with blinding flashes of knowing, moments where you simply feel their heavy nearness despite the physical distance, where you receive crystal clear internal signals that they are obsessively thinking of you, wrestling with the agonizing decision to make contact, mentally preparing themselves to finally speak what has been suffocated in silence. Dreams may vividly deliver their image, not as random memory fragments, but as desperate transmissions from the deeper layers of consciousness where your souls communicate without the waking ego's fearful interference. They may appear unexpectedly in physical spaces, desperately engineering situations that allow them to just see you without risking direct vulnerability. Their energy is rapidly transitioning from stubborn and resistant to entirely ready, from heavily defended to utterly desperate, from arrogant and prideful to something dangerously close to pleading. Share this video with someone who feels their person's energy shifting, who senses the rapid approach of the conversation that changes everything, who knows in their deepest knowing that the heavy silence is about to crack. The universe is flawlessly coordinating the divine timing of your reconnection, perfectly aligning circumstances and consciousness in preparation for the explosive moment when toxic pride finally surrenders to raw truth. When crippling fear steps aside for breathtaking honesty, when the person who cowardly walked away finally locates the fierce courage required to return to you. But here's what carries the absolute most weight. Whether or not they reach out, whether or not they find that desperate courage, whether or not this dramatic reconnection materializes in the exact timing and form you might wish for, you are already moving toward your highest, most beautiful good. You hold all the power now, not the bitter, toxic power of revenge, not the hollow, empty satisfaction of withholding love as a cruel punishment. You hold the authentic, unstoppable power that arrives when you finally choose yourself, when you recognize your radiant worth entirely outside of their validation, when you deeply understand that your profound peace matters so much more than the resolution of any particular relationship. You owe them absolutely nothing, not your infinite waiting, not an eternally open door simply because they have finally, tragically recognized what they discarded. Not the sacred benefit of your presence, just because they have decided on their own selfish timeline that they are finally ready to appreciate what they once threw away. Your beautiful healing, your magnificent growth, your unstoppable movement toward wholeness are not obligations to suspend while someone else struggles to catch up to the emotional maturity they should have brought to the table from the very beginning. The profound paradox holding the absolute truth for your soul in this exact moment is this: whether they return or not, you have already won. You have won because you stopped abandoning your beautiful self to wait for someone else to choose you. You have won because you redirected your precious energy from trying to make them see your radiant value toward actually living that value in ways that violently serve your own becoming. You have won because you fiercely chose peace over chaos, self-respect over pathetic crumbs, and full, beautiful presence over a comfortable, toxic fantasy. If they return genuinely transformed, with real, heavy accountability, genuinely changed behavior, and the profound emotional capacity to meet you as an absolute equal, then you get to decide, from your throne of power, whether this actually aligns with who you are spectacularly becoming, whether this serves your highest, most beautiful trajectory, whether this relationship actually deserves real estate in the magnificent life you are constructing. And if they do not return, if their toxic pride holds them silently hostage, or their fear keeps them freezing in the dark, or they simply remain entirely incapable of rising to match the breathtaking love you deserve, then you continue moving forward, uninterrupted, undeterred, undiminished. Your divine worth is not determined by their flawed recognition of it. Your spectacular value does not shift based on their blind awareness or tragic ignorance. You are not reduced by their cowardly departure, nor are you confirmed by their desperate return. You are whole. You are complete. You are inherently worthy of profound, unconditional love and genuine, unshakable commitment, regardless of whatever they ultimately choose to do with their own pathetic fear, stubborn pride, and unresolved wounds. This is your absolute power, not the illusion of power to control their messy decisions, but the unstoppable power to fiercely choose yourself, whatever they decide. This profound story is rapidly reaching its climax, hurtling toward the inevitable. Explosive resolution that divine timing has been flawlessly engineering beneath all the calm surface of your waiting and wondering. The agonizing energetic tension building between you two simply cannot sustain itself indefinitely. Something must violently fracture. Something must dramatically shift. Something must surrender to a completely new form. Either they return entirely honest, stripped of all their toxic pride and fake performance, ready to meet you with the raw vulnerability and fierce commitment that was tragically absent before, prepared to do the genuine, heavy internal work required to sustain the treasure they once handled so carelessly, or you gracefully close the door in absolute peace, deeply understanding that certain flawed people are placed in our path solely to reveal our own magnificent strength, rather than to actually walk beside us into our beautiful future, recognizing that their painful absence created precisely the sacred, empty space you desperately needed to discover who you become when you stop organizing your entire existence around someone else's unfulfilled potential. Both outcomes are massive victories. Both paths move you directly toward your highest, most beautiful alignment. Both possibilities profoundly serve your soul's continued spectacular evolution. If they return completely transformed, you receive a beautiful relationship constructed on mutual deep recognition and real, unshakable commitment, rather than the unstable, crumbling ground of assumption and cheap convenience that existed previously. If they do not return, or if they dare to return unchanged, you receive yourself fully, completely, without the agonizing fragmentation that occurs when we foolishly surrender precious pieces of our radiant soul to people entirely incapable of properly holding them. The universe is flawlessly aligning you with exactly what you genuinely deserve. It is arranging circumstances with a divine, ancient intelligence far exceeding what your conscious, fearful mind can ever perceive, orchestrating breathtaking outcomes that serve your ultimate expansion, even when the messy path forward feels terrifyingly uncertain. Trust the beautiful unfolding. Trust your own magnificent capacity to choose wisely. When the massive moment of decision finally arrives, trust that your fierce peace, your beautiful healing, and your absolute commitment to yourself has already permanently redirected the entire trajectory of your life in ways that time will make brilliantly clear as its sacred lessons are fully revealed. You are not waiting anymore. You are becoming. And whether they get to witness the spectacular becoming, whether they get to walk beside you on this beautiful path or not, you are moving toward the magnificent life and the profound love that perfectly matches the high, radiant frequency you now carry. The collision is coming, but you are already free.